Okay, so some people ask me for a demo of a Google Drive integration, and we have at least two groups who are doing some type of integration with Google Drive. And I suggested that I offered to help do this because I have some of my own apps in production that do Google Drive integrations, various types, working with the file system in Google Drive, and also reading and writing data to spreadsheets from Google Drive. My apps that do that are all in Python, so I just did a basic demo in our template framework of how to communicate with Google Drive, and I'll give you an overview now. Now there is good documentation for Google Drive, and I'll show you that in this video, but also frustratingly, all of Google's API documentation is incredibly dense and really hard sometimes to get direct to the point information on how to use it, especially around authentication and authorization. So by watching this video, you'll get straight to the point of how to get a key to authorize requests, and in the context that makes sense for you and your apps. Okay, so the first thing you do before you write any code is you go to your Google account. I've got some screens open here, but you need to be logged into Google, okay? So I've got many Google accounts for many different purposes, but this is my normal account. You'll all have one, I'm sure. And then when you're logged into your Google account, go to cloud.google.com. And this is the portal into Google's cloud services. So I've got already a cloud account, so I have this link to go straight to the console. I'm not sure if you do or don't. I really don't know. If you don't already have a Google Cloud account, but basically you need to enable your Google Cloud account, and then you need to go to the console, like so. And then you're going to get some type of screen, okay? And what you'll need to do, you see how you have this, I've got a few projects open in this account. Digital Product Jam I just did now. What you're going to do is first of all go and click New Project and create your own project, okay? And give it whatever name makes sense to you. And then it will take some time, it will generate a project. And then you'll be able to go back to, after the project's been generated, you'll be able to go back to the list here at the top and then click the project that you've created, okay? So that's what you're seeing here now. They change this UI all the time. So it's the first time I've seen this page. Basically what we want, once we're in our project, we're in the scope of Digital Product Jam, we want to go to IAM and admin. Okay. Now, again, there's tons of information in here for pretty significant cloud infrastructure work, and we need hardly any of it. So try and just follow the instructions I'm giving to get straight to the point of what we need. So there's a concept called a service account. If you remember from Supabase, I can't remember if it was called service account in Supabase, but we had a particular key, a service key I think it was called, that I told you to use to authenticate. That's a general concept of a service account, which is some type of token to authenticate with a public service, but in a way that doesn't require user interaction. Okay, so it's for machine-to-machine authenticated communication. So we definitely don't want to go to somewhere else in here like identity and organization and create a different type of account. We want a service account. Okay, then you go to create service account. I'll create a new one. Even though I'm not going to use this key. So you enter a name, so my dummy account. You give a description, this is for test, whatever, create and continue. This next step's optional, just click continue. and then click done. Okay, now this is the account I just created, my dummy account. You see how it's an email address? You're going to need that email address later, but I'll show you where to get it. So now you click here, and then you see some more details about this service account. And what we want is we want to go to the keys tab, okay? And then we want to do add key, create new key, and then we want key type JSON, which is the default. We want to leave that selected and click create. Okay. So now we've just created a key with various access credentials that's been downloaded to our computer. It's a JSON file that looks like, let me show you in a second. So I'll show you that in a second. So that's the end of our configuration within Google Cloud. We needed to create a service account and we needed to download a key in the JSON format. And then you'll see here it says key is active. Now, just so you know, you can revoke that key. You can make it inactive by clicking the trash can here. Maybe you should do that after we finish the course. You don't want keys to get leaked around or to be used that you're not aware of that are associated with your account. I'm actually going to delete that key that I just created right now. You shouldn't do that. That's because I've already created a different key that I'm using. But at the end of the course, maybe anyone who does something like this, talk to me. Don't just give your key to the Amulta or something like that, okay? It's a bit more, need to be a bit more purposeful about it than that. Okay, so that's how you create a service account key in Google Cloud. The next step, let's see. Okay. So here's the code that I've already pushed to GitHub. You'll see in that code, actually you should look at the commit. Let me show you that. If you ever want to look at changes that I make, but who anyone else makes, I mean, over time, as you all start to program more, you'll start to learn to use Gits in more useful ways, but you can see here I've created a single commit that implements all of this functionality. Okay, so it's worth looking at this. It's worth learning to read Git to learn how code bases change in general. Okay, so here's all the files that I've changed to add this functionality. As you see, there's not many, so you can definitely read through it. And what I did first of all, let's go back to my code editor. Okay, so what I did first of all is I created an end file, you all know that. I created a couple of variables, private key, client ID, client email, project ID. Okay, those four are all values that you take from that JSON file that you downloaded. And you should never share that JSON file with anyone. Here I'm showing my private key, but you can only see a small portion of it. You shouldn't even see that, really, and you shouldn't share this information anywhere. Maybe as a team, you'll download that key and share it between yourselves while you're developing, but you never commit that key or these values into the code repository. You do what we already did when we set up Supabase, which is that you add variables to your .env file. Then you read those variables into some type of value in your config file, okay? And then you use those values in your code base, and then it never gets to the code. And then obviously when you push your code to Vercel, you need to set those environment variables as you've already learned to do with Supabase. Okay, so this is the key that actually got downloaded from Google Cloud. It exactly looks like this. You can see I've only taken some of the values out of it. You have to be careful when you create your private key value, is make sure that you quote it. So you put it in quotes. The others, it doesn't really matter. It's never wrong to quote things. So you could quote everything else here in an env file. and I'm not going to bother to explain why or why not, but for the private key you'll need to quote it, okay? Otherwise it won't work. You'll get an error, but it won't work. Okay, so you've taken these 4 values out of your JSON key that was downloaded. Then what you do is go to your Google Drive account, which is associated with the same account as your Google Cloud account. Okay, then you create a folder. So I've created one called My Project, and get a link to the folder. Okay, copy link. And now from the link, get this key. Okay, can you see there that's a key? That's the identifier for the folder. You can't use the name for the folder, you need to use the identifier for the folder. And that's what I've got here as Google Drive directory. Now we always want to work within a folder so that we know where our stuff is, and in the use case, with whatever use case you have with YAML tar, there'll be one sort of top level directory that they're working within for whatever you're automating. So you want to do something like that. Okay, I've got Google Drive owner here. I haven't used that yet in this code base, so you can ignore that for now actually. Okay. But Google Drive directory is important because that's the scope in which you're going to be, your API, your automated processes will be working. And okay, so then the next step is to create the client. So, server client is used, that terminology is used all over the place in programming. Usually we're in the context that we're talking about with the web APIs. Also you have the web API, the API itself, which is the server, and then you have you commonly see referred to client libraries or sometimes SDKs, but people don't usually use that terminology in web development. Client libraries that are designed to work with some web API. So when you look back at the commits for the changes that I made, you'll see that I added a new dependency called Google APIs. Okay, and I installed that, so you'll have to install it. And then I imported Google from Google APIs and also my configuration. And you can see there's a couple of very simple things here that happen here. I create an auth object. I then instantiate a client, an auth client. And then I also instantiate a Drive client. So the Drive client uses an auth provider that we've already created. And this client now knows how to, this is specifically, Google have like hundreds of APIs and they're all accessible from this Google APIs library. But here you can see our client is we're exporting Google Drive, we're instantiating Google Drive, and we're creating a client for Google Drive. And we export it from our library, from our Drive file. Okay, so that's the configuration. You can also pay attention here to scopes. You can see what scopes was. Google APIs have this concept of scopes, so scopes are basically an array of strings, which are URIs, where each URI represents a certain permission. You might need to go into this a bit more if you need to do special activity within Google Drive, like for example work directly within spreadsheets or within documents and stuff like that. If you need to do that, talk to me or read up on Google Scopes. On Scopes, I call it Google Scope, but just read up on Scopes for Google APIs. Okay. So then for the demo, all that I did, so there's our client. We export our client from the Drive module. I created 2 example endpoints here. So again, if you remember with Next, you can expose an API with an API container, and then I created 2 endpoints to my API, one called list, one called create folder. And those just wrap functionality from the Google Drive API and expose it to, ultimately we'll expose it to my client code. So you can see here in list, all I do is like client, as you remember, I exported that from the Drive module, and then the Drive client has all sorts of methods on it. So there's one called list under the files object. I tell it which parent that I want to work with. I tell it what fields to return in the response that I get back. And then, I got my response and I print my response to the page. So if I do run dev and look at that, now let's go here. So now I'm going to hit that endpoint. And you see I get back a list of the files that I have here in my project. Okay. Likewise, I created a demo endpoint to create a folder. I decided to pass a name dynamically as a query parameter, and then I give that name as when I create the resource. Note that I always tell it which parent folder to put it in. So again, we're making sure that all of anything we create goes within the folder, sort of our workspace. You can see here this MIME type is the MIME type to actually, this is what tells Google to create a folder and not some other type of document. Okay, again, you can look up Google Drive API MIME types and you'll see they use MIME type to dispatch the type of method that's actually being created for the type of document that's being created. And if you don't know what MIME types are, you can definitely go and read about those. They're pretty important for in many contexts, but definitely in the web. Okay, so this endpoint, create folder, as you can see, I take a parameter from the query parameters called name and pass that as the name of the directory that I'm creating. So let's see how that works. Create folder, name equals poll test. Okay, so I got a successful response back, and if I reload this page, you'll see that poll test is now here. So I've just created another folder inside my directory. Okay, a few things to point out. Here you'll see that for reasons that I don't quite understand right now, I didn't really look into it, but you'll see that when I use await on the Google library, it tells me I don't need to use await, but that's actually wrong. I do need to use await. It might be something to do with the way that the Google library is written. I really don't know at this stage, but you do need to use await. They're asynchronous calls, this one and also this one. But when you pull this code yourself and experiment, you can try removing await and you'll see what happens. The response will be returned before the query is finished. And what else is important to point out in here? I think that's it for there. Now I'm going to show you. Oh, okay, no, there was another configuration point for you have to actually, after you've created your service account, you do actually have to go to a page called APIs and Services within the Cloud Console and enable the Google Drive API. So you go down here and you click, this is disabled now, but when it's not enabled, you click enable. So there's always a section called APIs and Services. Just like we went before to the section called IAM and Admin, there's also a section called APIs and Services. And you go in here and you make sure that you enable the Google Drive API. Otherwise, you won't get any responses at all from your API requests, but you'll get a helpful error message to tell you that that's what's happened. Okay, so now I've given you an example of how to create a folder and how to read a list of files. Okay, now that's enough to configure the whole thing. If you're going to, most of you will need to do more things. The documentation in here is quite good. Once you've got the authentication stuff out of the way, It gives you a few nice examples here of common tasks. You can go and read the guides. Okay, you can see here, you know, download files, for example, or share files, all sorts of actions that you can do on data, on resources within Google Drive. You can always go to the Node.js Quick Start to get a JavaScript based Quick Start, which will talk you through some of the steps. You see that there's a sample section here. Definitely feel free to go and look at that, but don't get confused by stuff that's irrelevant to what you want to do. There's so much information in here. Just focus on what your actual use case is. For example, write down the actions that you want to take with files on Google Drive, and then really try and be really targeted and find the references that you need for that. You go to the API reference is probably the most detailed section in here. So you go to version 3. Version 2 is the old version of this API. Version 3 is the current one. And then you can see there's just tons of information in here. A lot of stuff you won't need. The things like, you know, all the commenting on Google Docs, there's an API for all of it. Deep API for permissioning, for replies, revisions, so different versions of docs. It's very, very powerful. You're probably going to just need the files section. And that's it. You should be able to, with that, get running and at least work out what you need to know in here. A few gotchas. Names. This is the main one, actually, that I think will be relevant for all of you in your projects. Names do not need to be unique in Google Drive. There's an identifier for each folder, which is unique, but the names can be the same. So if you're doing things like generating a folder, you're going to need to make sure that the name that you're trying to use does not already exist. So although the example I've given you shows the simplest way to do things, like list a set of, I've shown you how to list a set of folders within a folder, and I've shown you how to create a folder. You're probably going to do some type of validation to make sure that you create what you intend to create on Google Drive. You're probably going to need to do things like, before you create a folder, check that a folder with that name doesn't already exist. If it does already exist, maybe you need to ask the user, hey, do you intend to create this, or whatever, or maybe just throw an error and say you can't create this folder because it already exists. So as always in programming, the devil's in the details, and there'll be lots of sort of edge cases like that you will want to handle in order to create a good user experience for your program, but these are the basics, what we've gone over now.